The ER doors of Redfield Methodist burst open. Silence snapped across the hallway. Nurses stared. A cart clattered to the floor. A police officer staggered inside, uniform torn, breath shaking, carrying a blood-soaked German shepherd in his arms. Paw prints smeared the tiles behind him, like warnings written in red. But what truly froze everyone was the terror in his eyes. He would not lose his partner tonight. Before we continue, subscribe to witness this miracle of courage, loyalty, and God's protection. Snow drifted lazily over the pine-covered mountains of Redfield, Montana, turning the forest floor into a pale shroud that swallowed sound and light alike. Night had a way of stretching endlessly here, as if the stars refused to blink in fear of what the darkness might do when unobserved. In this silent wilderness ran a man and his dog, two figures locked together by loyalty and war. Officer Ethan Walker, 32 years old, long-limbed and broad-shouldered, staggered through brittle underbrush with his breath punching into the freezing air. His face, angular, with a stubborn jaw and one faint scar along the right cheek, twitched from pain but never from fear. His deep brown eyes stayed razor-sharp, flicking through shadows for threats. Years of police service and a broken family past had carved quiet resolve into him. His father, once a proud sheriff, died in the line of duty, leaving Ethan to carry the badge with both pride and a weight that pressed into his ribs like permanent bruises. Beside him ran Hunter, a 4-year-old German shepherd with a muscular frame and thick sable coat dusted in white flakes. Under normal conditions, his posture was proud and alert, ears pricked like crown tips of a warrior. But tonight the dog wheezed, dragging one hind leg through the snow, every movement a tremor of agony. His golden-brown eyes, usually sharp as a hawk, were clouded with shock, yet still burned with fierce protectiveness. Hunter was trained for danger, for saving lives, not for becoming the victim of a monster's boot. Behind them, in the choking dark, headlights tore through the forest, and voices ricocheted like gunshots, angry, determined, hunting. The Marlowe cartel, a cruel ring running drugs through mountain trails, had ambushed Ethan and Hunter during a covert surveillance call. It wasn't supposed to turn into a firefight, but criminals rarely respected plans, or law, or life. Ethan's breath hitched as he looked down at Hunter, who stumbled and collapsed into the snow. Panic slammed into Ethan's chest like a bullet he'd never seen coming. He fell to his knees, hands trembling as they skimmed over Hunter's body. Beneath his gloves he felt warm blood, too much blood, and bones shifting where they shouldn't. "Hey, partner. Hey, look at me," Ethan whispered, voice shredding under fear. "Stay awake. That's an order." Hunter blinked slowly, muzzle twitching, a thin thread of trust holding his gaze. Ethan swallowed hard. This dog had dragged him out of burning buildings, chased murderers into dark alleys, and stood between him and death a dozen times. Hunter wasn't just a K-9 officer. He was Ethan's last connection to hope, to loyalty, to love he didn't dare speak aloud. Gunfire snapped the night open again. Ethan jerked upright. The cartel was close, too close. Instinct roared inside him, the same protective instinct inherited from the father he lost. He lifted Hunter into his arms, muscles trembling under the weight. Hunter whimpered, a broken sound that made Ethan's throat throb. "I know, buddy. I know," he whispered, his voice a quiet vow. "But I'm getting you out of here." Branches slapped Ethan's face as he sprinted down the slope, boots slipping on hidden ice. Each step sent lightning through his ankle, where a bullet had grazed him earlier. but adrenaline burned away that hesitation. Hunter's warm weight against his chest reminded him that time was the real enemy now. Lights, in the distance. A road. Civilization. Life. Ethan barreled through the final line of trees toward the thin strip of asphalt leading to Redfield Methodist Hospital, a stone-walled building standing like a lone sentinel in the snowy dark. His lungs ignited with fire. His legs screamed to stop. His heart refused. The emergency doors slid open on a rush of heat and fluorescent glare. Nurses froze mid-step, eyes wide. Ethan looked like a ghost risen from war, uniform torn and smeared, cheeks cut by branches, breath slicing the air in jagged bursts. Blood dripped from Hunter across Ethan's arms, splattering crimson trails on the pristine floor. "Help!" Ethan shouted, his voice cracking yet heavy with command. "This is Officer Hunter, K9. He needs immediate surgery. Please." The room wavered around him. His vision tunneled. But before he could collapse, hands grabbed Hunter, lifting him onto a gurney. Ethan staggered after them, refusing to lose sight of that stretcher, because losing sight felt too much like losing Hunter forever. As the trauma doors slammed shut, Ethan pressed his forehead against the glass, breath fogging the surface. He whispered, as if his words could keep the light from fading in the dog's eyes. "Don't you dare leave me now." The trauma doors snapped shut between Ethan Walker and the operating table, where Hunter now fought for his life. Ethan's heartbeat felt like a fist pounding inside his skull. Every second the glass stood between them was a second he feared death would reach Hunter first. He forced air into his lungs like he was inhaling a blizzard. Footsteps approached. A woman's voice, calm but edged with urgency. Nurse Emma Brooks, 28, with light blonde hair tied into a practical ponytail and porcelain-pale skin lightly specked with freckles, stepped toward him. She had soft blue eyes that revealed kindness layered over fatigue, someone who had seen too many broken bodies but refused to let them break her. "Officer Walker," she said gently, placing a steadying hand on his arm. "Your K9 partner is in the best hands we have." Ethan blinked, not recognizing the cut on his brow, until she pressed a sterile pad to it. He didn't flinch. His nerves were all inside that room. The glass door swayed open as Dr. Lucas Hartman entered the hall. He was in his early 40s, tall and lean, with salt and pepper hair that suggested wisdom weathered by experience. His square jaw carried a trace of stubble, and faint lines creased the corners of eyes the gray of winter storms, eyes that had seen life slip away too often to ever take a heartbeat for granted. A veteran military field surgeon, he had come home from Afghanistan, with medals he never bragged about, and nightmares he rarely slept through. But tonight, he was focused entirely on the dog whose life now lay under his scalpel. "Officer Walker," Dr. Hartman greeted, voice steady. "Hunter has a fractured rib, likely puncturing the lung. He also has soft tissue damage on the hind leg and significant internal bleeding." Ethan swallowed the rising dread. Hartman continued, "We're prepping for surgery. It won't be simple, but I'm not giving up on him." Ethan nodded, a small motion, but filled with desperate hope. "He wouldn't give up on me," Ethan said, voice hoarse. "So don't let me give up on him." As Hunter was wheeled away, Ethan followed as far as he could until security stopped him gently. One guard, Officer Gary Doyle, a stout, middle-aged man with thinning brown hair and eyes always heavy, as if holding the weight of long nights, gave Ethan a sympathetic nod. "We'll keep the hallway clear," he assured quietly. Doyle was the kind of man who had seen enough tragedy to speak softly, but enough courage to act loudly when needed. Finally forced to sit, Ethan collapsed into a chair outside the surgical wing. The scent of disinfectant clawed at his throat. Emma returned with a small first aid tray, disinfecting Ethan's wounds with careful, decisive movements. "You're lucky, too," she murmured. Ethan shook his head. "I'm not the one on that table." But his hands betrayed him, shaking despite every ounce of discipline. He pressed his palms together, whispering, half-formed prayers he didn't remember learning. Minutes spilled into hours. Every time the door swung open, Ethan jerked upright. His mind replayed the ambush, Hunter launching himself at the cartel leader, the thud of a boot against ribs that weren't built to withstand cruelty. Ethan's jaw clenched, and guilt carved into him sharply. If he had reacted faster, if he hadn't underestimated the danger, Hunter wouldn't be in there fighting alone. Nurse Emma sat beside him, sensing the war inside him. "He's not just a dog to you," she stated softly, not as a question, but a truth understood. Ethan looked up, eyes red-rimmed but fierce. "He's family," he whispered. "He's the only partner who's never walked away." Emma nodded, knowing loss in her own private way, the kind buried deep enough to keep working through grief. Just as despair threatened to root itself fully in Ethan's bones, the surgical doors finally swung open. Dr. Hartman emerged, mask pulled down to reveal lips pressed thin, not in defeat, but exhaustion. He stepped toward Ethan, wiping sweat from his temple. "He's alive," the doctor said, and for a breathless heartbeat, Ethan couldn't move. "He's not out of the woods," Hartman added firmly, "but he fought hard, and I'm going to keep fighting with him." Ethan exhaled a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Before Ethan could respond, a low, weak whine drifted from the gurney inside, Hunter still clinging to consciousness. Ethan rushed to the doorway but stopped as staff positioned equipment around the recovering dog. Through the machines and IV lines, Hunter's eyes cracked open ever so faintly, flickering with recognition before they closed again, trusting Ethan to watch over him as he had always watched over Ethan. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, relief and fear tangled into one impossible knot. "I'm right here," he whispered. And the night, hostile as it had seemed before, finally took a breath longer and softer, because hope had refused to die tonight. Hunter lay in the recovery room, tethered to beeping machines that measured every breath he fought to keep. The air smelled of antiseptic and warm fur, a strange combination that pressed memory and fear into Ethan Walker's lungs. He stood at the foot of Hunter's bed, arms crossed tightly over his chest, a stance that looked like confidence from afar, but was really just a man trying to hold himself together. Nurse Emma Brooks moved quietly through the room, checking fluid lines and adjusting the blanket over Hunter's injured hind leg. Her gentle concentration brought Ethan a strange peace he hadn't felt in hours. The compassion etched into her features, the way she smiled softly at patients even when exhaustion weighed down her posture. These were the things that kept places like this from dissolving into despair. Tonight, she was the steady voice telling him to breathe. A low rumble of thunder rolled outside, though the storm had not yet reached the hospital. Ethan's police instincts twitched at the unsettling silence in the hall beyond, as if trouble lurked just past the glow of the monitors. He checked the wall clock. Past midnight. Most hospital staff were either charting in silence or catching brief naps in break rooms. Vulnerable hours. Hours when bad things liked to strike. The door opened and Detective Mason Carter stepped inside, his presence filling the small space. Mason was in his late 30s, broad-chested with a thick beard the color of worn leather and tired hazel eyes that had watched too many criminals walk free. A jagged scar curved just beneath his ear, a gift from a suspect who didn't want cuffs. Mason was loyal like a storm, powerful, unyielding, and unpredictable when angered. He'd been Ethan's mentor in the force since Ethan's early rookie days after his father's death. "Walker," Mason said, voice low and gravelly. "Got an update. The cartel isn't done. We intercepted radio chatter. They're regrouping. They want loose ends cleaned up." His eyes flicked to Hunter. "And that dog did some serious damage to their leader's arm. They won't forget that." Ethan's muscles locked. "So they'll come here." "They might already be nearby," Mason replied. "We've got patrols sweeping the parking lot. But hospital like this? Too many entrances. Too many shadows." Emma stopped what she was doing, worry tightening her jaw. "You're saying we're not safe?" Before Mason could answer, the overhead lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied again, a coded warning from the building itself. Ethan stepped closer to Hunter, his voice barely above a growl. "They're not touching him. Not while I'm breathing." The fierceness in his eyes reminded Mason why Ethan had survived the force this long. Not luck, not speed, but sheer refusal to quit. At the hallway's far end, the elevator dinged. Doors slid open with a metallic sigh. Mason instinctively reached for his sidearm. Ethan mirrored him. A man stepped out wearing dark hospital scrubs, a hooded coat, head dipped. He moved too quickly to be a doctor finishing rounds, too stiffly to be a janitor. Ethan's pulse spiked as the man glanced up, just long enough for Ethan to see a sharp jaw, a fresh bandage wrapping his left forearm, and eyes like a cobra tasting fear in the air. Marco Vega, the cartel enforcer who had crushed Hunter's ribs in the forest. Marco's lips curled into a wicked smirk when his gaze locked on Ethan through the glass wall of the recovery room. He lifted a finger and traced it across his throat in a silent promise. Ethan pushed through the door, stepping between Marco and the room, rage sharpening his voice to a blade. "You're done." Marco let out a low laugh, mocking, fearless, before turning and walking away as if strolling into a nightmare he owned. Mason cursed, rushing after him, yelling into his radio for backup. Emma gasped, stepping backward, eyes wide. Hunter, though groggy from anesthesia, lifted his head and let out a trembling growl, protective instinct waking even before his strength returned. Ethan knelt beside Hunter, cupping the dog's head gently. "It's okay," he whispered, though his own voice shook. "I won't let him near you." Hunter blinked slowly, trusting him with every flicker of consciousness. Outside the window, the storm finally broke, rain pounding against glass, lightning slashing the sky like a warning. The night was far from over. Danger had found the hospital, and Ethan knew he needed to be ready to fight before it reached the one friend he couldn't lose again. Because tonight, hope was sleeping here, and monsters had already learned the room number. Lightning clawed across the windows, as if the sky itself was warning the hospital of what stalked inside its walls. Rain hammered the glass like fists, desperate to be heard. Ethan Walker's pulse beat in sync with the storm, fast, violent, and ready to break bones. Police radios crackled faintly in the corridor. Detective Mason Carter had vanished around the corner in pursuit of Marco Vega, leaving Ethan briefly alone with Hunter and nurse Emma Brooks. The silence that followed was not safety. It was the inhale before a strike. Emma checked the window locks with trembling fingers. She wasn't a coward. She had chosen a profession that stared death in the face every day. But this was different. Hospitals heal. Hunting happens elsewhere. Yet danger had slithered right into their sanctuary. Ethan steadied himself. He was tall and strong, yes, but the real steel inside him came from years of surviving heartbreak. His father's death, partners injured, lives he failed to save. He refused to fail this one. Hunter was more than a partner. He was the last piece of unconditional loyalty Ethan had left. The elevator dinged again. Too soon. Too quiet. Ethan aimed instinctively. Two paramedics stepped out pushing a rolling cart of supplies. Their expressions flickered, shock at the drawn gun, then fear. Ethan exhaled hard, lowering his weapon. Sorry. Danger in the building. Identify yourselves. They stuttered their names and moved on, shaken but alive. The next sound was worse. A scream, high, sharp, cut off too quickly. Stay with Hunter, Ethan ordered Emma. She opened her mouth to protest, then saw his eyes, a soldier's command when hope is a luxury, and nodded. Ethan slipped out, steps silent but full of fire. At the intersection of two dim hallways stood a security officer slumped against the wall. Officer Harold White, a portly man in his 50s with silver hair and kind wrinkles, who always joked about retiring to fish in Idaho. Blood ran from a deep cut near his temple. His chest rose and fell, but barely. Ethan crouched beside him. Harold, you with me? The older man blinked once, breath rattling like loose glass. He's got a weapon. 2 more with him. His voice faded. Ethan swallowed a curse and pressed him gently back, making a silent promise that Harold wouldn't be forgotten. A sudden crash erupted behind Ethan. He spun, too late to avoid the shadow charging him. A boot slammed into his ribs, sending him sliding across the slick floor. Marco Vega towered over him now, drenched from rain with dark scrubs clinging to a muscular chest inked with cartel insignias. His black hair was shaved close on the sides, leaving a jagged scar slicing through his eyebrow, a souvenir from a knife fight he'd bragged about online. You, Marco hissed, accent curling around the word like venom. Your dog cost me blood. Now I collect yours. Ethan surged up with a grunt, rage fueling motion. The two men collided like wolves fighting over a single heartbeat. Marco swung wildly, brute strength behind each punch. Ethan blocked one blow, took another to the jaw that rattled stars loose behind his eyes, then struck Marco's throat with his forearm. Short, tactical, police precise. Marco stumbled back, snarling. I'm not the one you want, Ethan spat. You want the dog who tore your arm apart. Marco smiled, a predator's smirk. Oh, I plan to finish him too. That sentence flipped a switch inside Ethan. He launched forward. This was no longer a fight of duty. This was protection carved from his soul. Punches flew, bone cracking against bone. Marco drove Ethan into a supply cart, metal crashing and syringes spilling across the floor like spilled fate. Marco drew a knife from his sleeve, thin, gleaming, and hungry for a heartbeat. He lunged. A roar shattered the hall. Hunter, limping, stitches straining, burst from the recovery room, IV line trailing, fury igniting his shattered ribs. Emma scrambled behind him, shouting for help, but Hunter only saw the threat. His hackles rose, saliva mixing with blood at his teeth. Marco spun toward the dog, blade poised to end the story here. No! Ethan shouted. Hunter leaped, jaws wide, and the storm outside screamed as if the world knew the cost of courage. For an instant, time froze. Hunter was in the air, every muscle strained and trembling, stitches threatening to tear, ribs screaming beneath his fur. Marco Vega twisted, knife ready to strike upward into the heroic arc of the dog's leap. Ethan's instincts detonated. He lunged, slamming his shoulder into Marco's ribs just as Hunter collided with the man's arm. The knife clattered across the floor, metal screeching like a terrified bird. Marco hit the ground hard, breath punched from his chest. Hunter landed awkwardly, a pained yelp ripping from his throat, but he stood between Ethan and danger, legs shaking, eyes burning with loyalty stronger than pain. Marco snarled and reached for the knife, but Ethan was faster. He pinned the man's wrist with brutal precision. "It's over," Ethan growled through clenched teeth. A shout echoed from the hallway. Detective Mason Carter burst into view, gun trained, soaked in rain and sweat. Behind him, two uniformed officers rushed forward. One was Officer Daniel Hughes, a rookie in his mid-20s with sandy hair and an earnest expression, cheeks flushed with the adrenaline of his first real firefight. The other was Sergeant Roy Miller, a stocky veteran with short gray hair and sharp blue eyes that had seen too many hospital hallways become crime scenes. They cuffed Marco while Mason barked orders to secure the rest of the building. Marco spat curses, but the fight was gone from him. He lost to a wounded dog and a man who refused to break. Ethan turned immediately to Hunter, dropping to his knees. His hands hovered, afraid to make the dog hurt worse. Hunter leaned his head into Ethan's chest, breathing ragged but steady, letting Ethan feel the pulse of life he had fought so hard to protect. "You insane, brave boy," Ethan whispered, forehead pressed to Hunter's. "You saved me. Again." Emma Brooks hurried over, breath hitching in relief when she saw them both alive. "We need to get him back to the recovery room," she urged gently. Her eyes glistened from everything that almost happened, but didn't. As staff rolled Hunter back inside, Ethan walked beside him, refusing to let go of his paw. Nurses worked quickly, pain meds, bandage checks, new stitches where the old ones tore. Hunter's eyes drooped, exhausted but safe, his tail tapping the blanket as it brushed Ethan's arm. The storm outside began to ease. Thunder softened into distant grumbles, like tired giants retreating into sleep. Hours later, Ethan sat in a quiet waiting room, not because anyone told him to wait, but because his body finally insisted he sit down. His knuckles were raw, ribs bruised purple beneath his uniform. Yet for the first time tonight, he felt light, hopeful. Dr. Lucas Hartman emerged with new scrubs, sleeves rolled up, hair tousled from the chaos. He gave a small, tired smile, a rare gift from a man hardened by war. "Hunter's stable," he said. "Heroic, foolish, stubborn, just like his handler." Ethan let out a laugh, weak but real. "Thank you," he said, and the words felt too small for the mountain of gratitude behind them. Morning crept slowly into Redfield Methodist Hospital. Sunlight tangled in the wet pine branches outside, creating gold-green mosaics that reflected onto the polished floors. The chaos of the night faded into the hush of new beginnings. Emma walked Ethan down the hallway toward Hunter's room. "You know," she said softly, adjusting a loose strand of blonde hair behind her ear, "most people would have run from that kind of danger." "Most dogs too," Ethan replied. Emma smiled, warm and steady. "You two make each other stronger." When Ethan stepped into Hunter's room, the dog's ears perked instantly. Despite the monitors, the bandages, the exhaustion, Hunter thumped his tail like a drum announcing joy. Ethan sat down on the floor beside him, letting Hunter's weight lean into his thigh. "You're not just coming home," Ethan murmured. "You're staying home." There had been talk for a long time about retiring Hunter from the K-9 unit. After tonight, there was no question. Hunter would not return to chasing bullets and shadows. He would heal, learn peace, and sleep somewhere he belonged. Ethan scratched under Hunter's chin, tears blurring his vision. "We made it," he whispered. "Tomorrow's ours." Outside the window, the sun rose fully. The storm was gone. The world was bright again. And a new promise, one built from survival and love, waited for them just beyond the hospital doors. Because sometimes heroes need saving too, and sometimes the bravest thing is not the fight, but the choice to stay alive for someone who loves you. Sometimes, God sends his angels in the most unexpected forms, not always with wings, sometimes with fur, tired paws, and hearts that never give up on us. Hunter didn't just save Ethan from danger. He reminded all of us that miracles still walk beside us, watch over us, and carry us when we cannot carry ourselves. In this world, we all face storms, some loud like thunder, some silent inside our hearts. But tonight, hope survived. Love fought back, and faith won. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need a reminder that God still works through loyal hearts and brave souls. Leave a comment about the guardian angels in your life, and subscribe for more stories of courage, healing, and love. May God bless you and everyone you hold dear, and may his protection follow you, just as Hunter followed Ethan every step of the way. Amen.